Did you know Logic has a hidden tape plugin? It's the Logic Pro Tape Delay, and I got it loaded up here. And we're going to talk about what parameters you need to disable so that it's no longer a delay and just a tape plugin. So the first thing we're going to do is set the feedback all the way down to 0.
Feedback, 16% slider, 8% slider, in, 16%, 8%, in slider, 3%. Out of slider.
And then
High cut, 20, low cut, tempo sync, free radio button, sync selected radio button.
We need to switch the tempo sync from tempo synced or synced to free.
In, free radio button. Select classic electric piano, dialog, classic electric piano.
And when you do that, it puts you back at the top of the window.
Table, row 1 of 20. Feedback, 0% slider, 0% slider, selected.
So you just got to go to the table and interact with that again.
In table, row 1 of 20.
Let's continue. Going to VO down.
High cut, low cut, tempo sync, note, 1/deviation, smoothing, 40, flutter rate, 0, flutter intensity, LFO rate, 0, LFO intensity, freeze, uncheck, check, dry, 70% slider, 70% slider.
To the dry control, and we want to set the dry control all the way down to 0.
In, 70%, slider, in slider, 6, 50, 40, 35, 30, 20, 20, 10, 5, 0. Out of slider. Wet, 30% slider, 30% slider.
And set the wet control all the way up to 100%.
In, wet, 30%, in slide, 30, 40, 40, 50, 6, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 1. Out of slider. Caps lock off.
This wet control essentially becomes a output volume, so you can adjust it to get the level right coming out of the plugin.
Clip threshold, 0.0 decibel slider, 50% delay time, 500.0 millisecond slider, 10% slider.
Last thing we need to do is set the delay time all the way down to 0.
In, 500, 10%, in slide, 5, 0.
All right.
Out of slider.
So once you do all of that, this is essentially now just a tape plugin. And the parameters you want to pay attention to are going to be the tape head.
Stereo spread, 0 slider, tape head mode, clean selected radio button, diffuse radio button.
Clean and diffuse. So clean is going to be a cleaner tape. Diffuse is going to be more like an old tape.
Stereo spread, delay time, clip threshold, 0.0 decibel slider, 50% slider.
Clip threshold is going to adjust the amount of saturation or distortion that you get out of this plugin. So pull it down, lower values, negative values is going to equal more distortion.
Wet, 100, dry, 0, freeze, uncheck, LFO intensity, LFO rate, 0, flutter intensity, 0% slider, 0% slider.
And the flutter intensity.
Flutter rate, 0.0 hertz slider, 0% slider. Smoothing, 40 millisecond slider, 4% slider.
Rate and smoothing are all going to adjust your tape parameters. You can think of intensity as how loud the effect is, flutter rate as how fast or slow the actual flutter is, and smooth is going to smooth that all out. Now, if you want some modulation as well, some additional movement, you can use the LFO section, and you have
flutter rate, LFO rate, LFO intensity, 0% slider, 0% slider.
LFO intensity.
LFO rate, 0.20 hertz slider, 10% slider.
And LFO rate. Same deal. Intensity adjusts how loud the effect is, and rate adjusts the speed of the effect. That's how you can use the Logic Pro Tape Delay as a tape plugin. If you're using Logic on an Apple Silicon Mac, that's a Mac with an M1, M2, or M3 processor, then you also have ChromaGlow at your disposal, and that also now has a tape emulation in it. It's called Magnetic Tape. Like, share, and subscribe.